Good morning. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Malden, or Mr. Malden.
Good morning and welcome to the November 19th, 2021 Washington Medical Commission Business Meeting. Amelia, you have the housekeeping issues to discuss to keep us all in line.
Yes, thank you for joining our business meeting today. This meeting is being recorded. The documents which will be discussed here today are available on the event calendar on our website, which is wmc.wa.gov. They are also available in the handout section of the webinar. I'm Amelia Boyd and I am the Program Manager for the Medical Commission. Jimmy Bush and I are the organizers for this meeting. Panelists, please be sure to mute yourself if you are not speaking. Attendees are automatically muted. Please note that anything posted to the chat or questions section is considered public record. We will take public comment at this meeting. Once we get to that item, the chair, Mr. Malden, will read a script, excuse me, and then ask for public comment. If you would like to comment, please use the raise your hand feature or add your comments to the question section. Our time for public comment is limited and each speaker is likely to only have about 2 minutes to speak. And with that, I will hand it back over to Mr. Malden for his chair report.
Thank you, Amelia. The chair report this morning is primarily people recognition. I'd like to extend and ask everyone to extend a warm welcome to Arlene Doro, our newest commission member. I see she's on the line and waving at us, so welcome, Arlene. Our other new commissioner is Anjali De Souza. Hope I'm saying that correctly. She's currently on medical leave and will be joining us early next year, as I understand it. So Arlene, I've pre-warned you that typically I ask new members to say a few words about themselves and why they are interested in being a medical commissioner. You disappeared on me, but I know you're there.
Hi, my name is Arlene, and I have been a physician assistant for the last 16 years and practicing in a variety of fields from occupational medicine currently and urgent care. I assist in an immigration clinic, and I have done vascular surgery assist and hospitalist and emergency room. And so I recently got my master's degree in public health and clinical health medicine, and I wanted to do something with it. So I decided to try to be on the medical commission, and it's been so rewarding. Even after the first one day, I think I've found my people. And I'm really glad to be on board.
We are happy to have you, and I enjoyed your enthusiasm yesterday, so welcome. Now a sad farewell to two commissioners who have served their terms, Teresa Schimmels and Charlotte Lewis. First, Teresa, my good friend, sad to see that you're gone. I think you are in attendance, at least I hope you are. Teresa, I sent an email to her. This is a little personal story that my first day on the commission, the person who reached out to me to give me a little direction was Teresa. And she gave me great direction, but I was absolutely clueless. I didn't know what she was talking about, but neither here nor there. She got me started on my journey at the commission, and I thank her very much for that. You will be sorely missed on panel B, Teresa. Although I understand you are going to be a pro tem, so we get to hear you in the future. And Charlotte, I don't know if you're listening or not. I hope you are. Charlotte's term has also ended, but as I understand it, Charlotte is going to continue as a pro tem and fill in for Dr. De Souza until she returns from medical leave. So thank you both for your long and dedicated service to the commission. Next item is our dearly departed legal staff. Larry Berg retired this month. He spent something in excess of 16 years on the Medical Commission. Larry was noted for his expertise. He always knew the history, knew what was going on, as well as enjoying his very subtle humor. Larry will be dearly missed on the commission. The second person, as you know, has moved on to, what is it, the Insurance Commissioner's Office, Ariel. I had the pleasure of working extensively with Ariel, both on cases and on Panel L. The most notable thing I think about Ariel is that she can talk really fast while seamlessly citing RCW language, which always amazed me. And I don't know why you'd want to know all that stuff, but she could do it and do it well. And I know that she will take her expertise to the Insurance Commissioner's Office and do well. So both missed, will be missed, I should say. And I also should say that I couldn't let him go without exchanging email niceties. So I had the opportunity to do that as soon as I got the word that they would both be leaving the commission. Hopefully others have done as well. I'd like to recognize Mike Hively as being promoted to the Director of Operations and Informatics. When I first heard that, I got really nervous because I thought I couldn't call him anymore with my computer issues. But Mike assured me the other day when I had a conversation with him that I can continue to call him and as well as others. And I think you had a lineup of folks to talk to about computer issues. So at least for now, Mike's our go-to guy still. That could change, but hopefully not. But anyway, congratulations, Mike. Last but not least, I want to recognize Melanie. In September of this year, she had completed 20 years of service to the people of the state of Washington. And I think at least about 7 of those years have been on the Medical Commission, or very close to that. It's no wonder you know so much, Melanie. You've been around a long time. And that's not any reflection on your age or anything. That's only that you've been committed public servant. So thank you, Melanie, for all of your service. The last item I have is a retreat reminder. I think everyone has been notified of the retreat. It's on December 9th from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. No, I'm just kidding about that. It's 9 to 4, but our agenda would suggest we'd go from 9 to 9. But hopefully we'll get through it in the allotted time. It's going to be held at the South Center Doubletree, and we are planning a hybrid in-person virtual meeting. I'm not sure if the mechanics of that have been worked out completely, Amelia, but okay, so. You can still have a little bit of time. Anyway, that's the plan, and hopefully it will work out well for all of the commissioners. That is it for the chair report. Moving on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda contains 2 items. The August 20th, 2021 business meeting minutes and the agenda for today's meeting.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Scott. Thank you. All in favor of Alden's motion to approve, raise your hand, say aye. Opposed? Opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. New business, meeting dates for 2024. Amelia, do you have comments about the proposed dates for for 2024?
I do not have any comments, but the proposed calendar is on page 13.
That's so far in the future, I can't imagine anybody having any objections at this date. But we still need to approve, so I need a motion. I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting dates for 2024?
So moved.
Second? There's a second from Yang Meng. Thank you, Yang Meng. All in favor, say aye. Or raise your
Aye.
hand, I should say. Okay. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to old business. We have committee reports found on page 24. Are there any updates to any of the committee reports from the chairs or anyone else who cares to comment?
I want to put out a plug that the Health Disparities Work Group is supposed to meet today. Hopefully, we've never actually all met together, so I'm hoping that all the stars align and we can meet today. And I think it's after the personal appearances. You should have gotten a calendar invite for that. If not, let me know. Thank you.
And I am the staff person on the Health Equity Advisory Committee, and I just wanted to update that report by saying we had our final meeting of that group this week. This group is scheduled to be disbanded at the end of the year, and I think we have we've accomplished our mission. We've gone over all of our policies, rules, guidelines, and has solicited public comment in both public forums and written. We haven't received anything that would require going to the policy committee for updating. So my suggestion, and I think this is where we're going to head, is we're going to kind of merge the Health Equity Advisory Committee and the Health Disparities Work Group into one. And so we'll leave the written public comment forum open in case someone has anything they would like to add. But any progress or updates to a policy or a guideline or a guiding document will be done moving forward by the Health Disparities Work Group.
Thank you, Jimmy. Any additional comments?
Just one, I want to thank Jimmy and Dr. Yeager for their work on this. This was something that came together pretty quickly, and they were gracious and willing to take it on. And there was quite a bit unknown in soliciting the public comment and specifically soliciting some experts in the field. And so I just appreciate their willingness to take it on, and job well done.
Thank you for those comments, Micah. Next item on the agenda is rulemaking activities. Amelia, do you have an update for us?
There are 2 items for action today, and the first one is regarding the International Medical Graduates Rulemaking, and the 101 is in the packet. And our ask here today is that we initiate the CR 102. The draft language is also in the packet.
We have a motion to request to initiate CR 102 process.
So
So
moved.
moved.
You in a second.
Second.
All in favor of moving the process forward, signify by saying aye, raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item, Amelia.
Thank you. So the next item we will discuss is the Clinical Support Program rulemaking. If you've been on the commission for longer than a year, you've heard about this rule. We've been working on it for 7 years since Melanie started. And it has been through many changes, and the draft language has changed a lot over that time. We actually rescinded the rulemaking at one point and restarted it. And so today, your options are for this rule, because the new draft language is now working outside of the CR 101 that we filed. And so our plan, I think, for now is to go ahead and rescind the 101 and then just pause this rulemaking for a while. So that's my ask today, is to rescind the 101.
And I'm sorry, and what are we going to do after that?
So we will just wait a while. We need to sort of regroup on this rule because it has changed so much. And right now the draft language doesn't really have any teeth. And so to put it in rule would, I mean, we could do it, but you know, it wouldn't have any weight, I guess. And so every time we talk about this rule, there's a lot of controversy and there is a lot of back and forth about, you know, certain pieces of it. And so I think the best thing for us to do right now is just rescind the 101, because right now the draft language does not mesh with the 101. So we're working outside of it. So we would have to rescind, even if you like the draft language that is in the packet, we would still have to rescind the 101 that we have right now because it doesn't, we're working outside of it. So
Probably
Mr.
my-
Molden, I want to also add that we are requesting that you rescind the 101, and we're going to regroup and look at other ways to accomplish what you want to do with this rule, which is to provide practitioners with technical or support and resources, not in any disciplinary way, but in a way to help them become better at whatever they're doing, or to give them information that they may not have. I've spoken with Heather, and we may not need to do this in a rule, so we kind of want to put a pin in this and regroup and come up with other options for the future that I think will actually be exactly what you want. If you want a change in the law, that's a different direction, but right now we're just looking at providing some sort of technical guidance to practitioners regarding complaints that we receive that don't rise to the level of discipline, but they're still, you know, they could be better at something like record keeping or whatever.
Probably my fault that it's become toothless. But it's, I mean, I think it's a really great thing we want to do. I just don't think it should come with potential penalties. So anyway, we'll work on that in the future. But for now, I will ask for a motion to rescind the current process. Second, favor signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Amelia. That's a, I don't know what the proposed lifespan was going to be of that, of this, but we'll get there someday.
Hopefully.
Next item on the agenda is the strategic plan. I've talked about this in the past. This is the most coolest strategic plan I've ever seen. Beats the old drab paragraph after paragraph. This is full of graphics and is just really cool and inviting to read. So not to take away from the message at all, but the graphics are fantastic. So Melanie, you mentioned before we got started a change proposed by Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, so at the last meeting, we you reviewed the strategic plan, and the only thing that was suggested to include was an addition to the strategic priorities, which is on page 30, Amelia, of the handout. And we added a strategic priority. It says integrate diversity and inclusion principles in WMC culture, systems, and policies. So that was what we added. We didn't change any other thing in the strategic plan. And I would like to thank Jimmy Bush for all of this. She did it all pretty much single-handedly, all the graphics. I mean, each business unit met, you all met to talk about your section of the plan, but each business unit also met and they basically wrote their own section. So we did add that to the strategic priorities, and that is the only change. So we are asking that you approve this today.
Entertain a motion to approve the strategic plan.
Move to approve the strategic plan.
Carrie, a second. Thank you, Claire. All in favor, signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Motion carries. Yeah, I can't say enough about how cool I think this strategic plan looks, and hopefully we will accomplish everything that's contained within the plan. Moving on to public comment. I will read the public comment script. We will now begin the portion of the business meeting to take public comment. The purpose is to allow members of the public to directly address the commission on issues of public concern. Please refrain from providing comments on pending or open investigations or disciplinary cases. We will not be answering questions or responding. Staff will be available after the meeting to answer your questions. Please understand that although the time period for comment during the business meeting is limited, the public can attend and provide comment at commission committee meetings. The public can also contact staff during normal business hours. We welcome written comments as well. Each commenter will have 2 minutes to speak. When you comment, please state your name and who you represent. Would anyone like to comment at this time?
There are no hands raised and no questions in the questions box.
We are not controversial. This concludes the public comment portion of the meeting. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, policy committee reports. And that's me substituting for Dr. Domino. And we had an exciting and full agenda yesterday. Pardon me while I find my notes. Okay. The first item that was discussed was the proposed policy establishing approved criteria for defining appropriate medical practices for IMG nomination. The report was recognized as being well written with a few minor changes. There was an issue over whether or not it was a guideline, or I guess it is a guideline and advisory. Mike, do you have any additional comments you'd like to make on the policy?
Yes. This you looked at the last business meeting. This arises out of a statute that the legislature just passed, creating a pathway for IMGs who didn't get a residency match to practice under supervision with a limited license. The statute really has two little issues in it that we're trying to resolve with these two documents. The first is, what is an appropriate medical practice? So this, on the second page, there is a definition, actually the bottom of the first page, beginning of the second, thank you, Amelia, that you looked at and we took back. And by the way, Micah Matthews did tremendous work on this issue, both in the formulation of the statute and the stakeholdering work afterward. And these comments come from IMGs and the physicians who will supervise them. So we're trying to provide some criteria for the commission to use when deciding whether to grant a limited license to an IMG.
And it's my understanding that once we approve this document, that it needs to go to the secretary for review, correct?
Yeah, it's a policy, so by statute, the secretary has to review it. We'll come back with comments, and then you'll give your final approval to it at a future meeting.
So today, we need a motion to adopt the policy and authorization to forward it to the secretary.
One comment, Chair Malden, just as an FYI, this applies to the MDCE or clinical experience license that, according to my written report, if you've read it, has launched. It launched in the middle of October, and we have issued our first MDCE license. So while we're, I don't want to say tardy, it was just simply the nature of implementing a bill with no effective date other than get it done right now. So we are following up establishing that license with this policy and with the interpretive statement. So while you are approving this, I do want to be fully transparent that after we did the negotiations and stakeholdering with the IMG groups, we are using this criteria internally when vetting applications until this is formalized and approved by the commission.
I'm sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. Are there other comments with regard to the policy? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adopt the policy.
Move to adopt.
Thank you, Alden. Is there a second? Thank you, April, Claire. All in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. The next item discussed was the proposed interpretive statement requiring the filing of a practice agreement before beginning to practice under an IMG limited license. Licensing has put together a practice agreement primarily based on the PA practice agreement. And it appeared from our conversation yesterday that it was in line and okay. Are there additional comments on the policy or on the practice agreement?
If I could make one.
Okay.
This is the other little issue that was left unresolved by the bill that passed the legislature. It requires the IMG to file a practice agreement with the commission, but doesn't say when it has to be filed. So this document just addresses that little issue. It just says that the practice agreement has to be filed with the commission before the IMG begins practice. That's the only issue this document addresses.
Are there further comments? The policy committee approved the document yesterday, so I'll entertain a motion to adopt the practice agreement.
So moved.
Thank you. A second. Thank you, Jim. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Motion carries. The next item on our agenda was the licensing application questions, and particularly personal data questions that contain a revision. And I believe Micah developed this document. Micah, do you have comments on any of the content?
Sure. Just a note that the directive from the policy committee was to delete a sentence, the last sentence in the first paragraph, which stated if you meet the criteria, you may answer no to question 1. Question 1 was altered to the point where that was not an accurate statement, so that was deleted. Question 1 is now exactly what policy asked to substitute for the original question, so that's all you're seeing there. The rest was vetted at previous policy committee and the previous business meeting, so those are the substantive changes.
We spent a long time trying to figure out how to get rid of a double negative on this policy. And thanks to Dr. Bundy, he gave us some straightforward language that made a whole lot of sense. So thank you, Dr. Bundy, if you're listening in. Any further comment?
John,
Dr. Small?
so actually, just a question as I'm reading question 1 there, et cetera, is not known to this physician's health program. Are we comfortable that anyone reading this is going to know what a physician's health program is? We obviously do, but I think there are probably any number of physicians out in the community that don't really understand that. Is there a definition of that anywhere?
There's not a definition, but if we go up to the first paragraph, it makes it clear what the physician health program is, what they deal with, and the the requirement that if you do meet any of those criteria with respect to physical or substance use conditions, it's on you, the applicant, to call them and get assessed.
And so that the first paragraph, is that right under where it says please note?
Correct.
And so it refers specifically to WPHP. So I'm not sure that there's not a discrepancy between that and just the phrase a physician's health program. And if I was
Right.
reading that, without what I know about the commission at this point, I would think, if my hospital has a physician's health program of some sort, that would qualify.
If we said a state physician health program, would that be more to your liking?
I think that would be better.
Anybody from the policy committee or the commission have thoughts on that change in question 1?
I actually like that. I think it's good. I don't know that it's necessary because almost anybody that's going to answer this question that is involved with a state program is going to know that. It is conceivable that somebody would get into that trap that was described by Dr. Small. So I think adding that state PHP program is a perfectly fine thing to do.
Yeah, it comes up more for new applicants who are out of state who may not be familiar. So that is a good clarification.
Okay, so Amelia, if we could scroll to question 1. So just insert state before the word physicians. Does that work?
Yep, that's good.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Small. It's a good catch. Any further comment?
Mr. Malden, I have a comment.
Okay.
Can you scroll up, Amelia? And Micah, when I sent you the changes, I think I forgot this, but we discussed changing safe harbor to safe haven. Remember that?
Yes, the nautical term.
And probably taking out the word provision. I don't think we talked about that, but that implies that we're entering.
Sorry, go ahead.
Does anybody have a problem with putting in safe haven and taking out the word harbor and provision?
That was Dr. Bundy's request, and I think it's a good request. It's speaking his lingo. Move to approve with those changes.
Thank you, Alden. Thank you, Dr. Small. All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Raise your hand. Seeing none, motion carries. The next item, somebody have a comment? No. The next item discussed was the proposed telemedicine policy. This statement has been around for a while. It had been sent to the Secretary's office and returned with a few changes. It was discussed at length yesterday. Mike, do you have additional comments on the policy?
Sure. We got some really good feedback from the Secretary's office, which I incorporated, and I realize now that the changes, clarity changes are not there. What the changes that are there are changes recommended by WSMA. You have a guideline that you issued back in 2014, and then you issued a policy in 2018 regarding continuity of care. And what we're asking you to do is to rescind those policies. What we're doing is joining them and updating them. Both of them were out of date, and the law has changed. So we have one document here for your approval. It essentially addresses two big issues. Number one is, when does a physician in another state practicing telemedicine need a license to practice medicine in the state of Washington? So that is addressed by describing several scenarios in which a physician in another state is treating a patient in Washington, but they're very specific and narrow. Amelia, if you could scroll down just a little bit. And I want to make sure that you're okay with all of these scenarios. I hope that you had a chance to read this beforehand. Scroll down to the licensing part. There you go. So we have a statutory exemption that's brand new that passed the legislature that allows a specialist in another state to consult with a Washington-based physician treating a Washington patient. That part's clear. The rest of it details circumstances under which the commission would allow a non-licensed physician to treat a Washington patient. The first one is getting a second opinion from, if you could scroll down a little more. This red underlined paragraph is not new. It was in the previous version. It's just been clarified, and that's why it's highlighted there. But it allows a second opinion with a specialist out of state by sending records to the to the specialist. That specialist doesn't need a license to practice medicine in the state of Washington. That's not clearly stated in the law, but this is a document saying that you're going to allow this to happen. If the specialist in the other state starts treating the patient, then the patient has to travel to that state where the specialist is located, or the patient can stay here but have a Washington licensed physician who consults with the specialist and thereby falls under this new statutory exemption. The other thing I wanted to point out, and there are other examples there that essentially incorporate your continuity of care policy, which is in existence. You adopted in 2018, and it just incorporates those scenarios about patients moving to the state of Washington or temporarily being in the state of Washington and having their physician in the other state continue to provide that care. Footnote number 4 in front of you addresses a question we get now and then, and that is, does a pathologist or a radiologist in another state have to be licensed here? And your traditional answer is yes, that it's not a consult, it's practicing medicine, it's coming up with a diagnosis, and that person needs to be licensed. And so that is, I hope, hopefully made clear in that footnote, that they're not providing a second opinion, they're not providing a specialty consult, they are treating the patient in the state of Washington by making that read or making that diagnosis. So I hope that that makes it clear. We can refer to that footnote when we get that question. This, by the way, may or may not involve telemedicine, and that's why it's in a footnote. If you could scroll down a little further, Amelia. I hope that you have had a chance to read this. This was presented back in August, and it's in your 2018 policy, as I mentioned. The second part of the document, the first part of the document deals with licensing. The second part of the document deals with standard of care. And these are just general guidelines for physicians using telemedicine on Washington patients. Nothing to do with licensing, it's just how to do it best. I don't think there's anything controversial here. We did have a discussion about the inclusion at the end about a section on the use of artificial intelligence. And the decision by the policy committee was to include it. Micah, feel free to jump in if you want.
The only thing I'll point out is there was a comment about the mobile medical technology, and I want to clarify why that's included. There is a restatement in the first two paragraphs of how that sector of medicine and operations work with respect to how it ties in with the federal level, specifically the FDA and the FTC. Really what we're doing here is one, providing the background, and then two, making it clear that when it comes to mobile medical apps or advertising, consumer protection type stuff, we will refer that as a commission to the federal level. We simply don't have the expertise or the resources to go after and regulate areas of that market. It is incredibly complex just to determine ownership, let alone if there are clinical involvement pieces there. So we are simply not equipped to do that. So that's what really the last statement in the third paragraph of mobile technology is referring to, is we are declaring that clearly not in the Medical Commission's jurisdiction, and we will simply refer it.
Mike, I think there was some discussion about whether this should be a policy document or a guidance document suggested by the Secretary's office. You care to comment on that?
Sure. This is in the format of a policy, and policy is defined by statute. And the Secretary's office says it really doesn't fit the definition of a policy because it's not interpreting a statute or rule or court decision. It really has, in my opinion, and they suggest breaking it out and having an interpretive statement to interpret the law regarding licensing that I went over, and then having a guideline to provide guidance to physicians using telemedicine. We'd rather have it, by we, I'm saying Micah and I believe the policy committee would rather have it all in one document and label it a policy. You could break it into two. You could change the title. The title really doesn't have much significance. I think it has, it's better if we can say this is the Medical Commission's policy on telemedicine. Here it is. It covers a number of topics, a number of different aspects, but here's one document you can look at to learn about everything the Commission has to say about telemedicine. So that's why the policy committee recommends that this be in policy format and be in one document, even though it has elements of a policy, a guideline, and interpretive statement all in one.
It seems like it's consistent with what we've done in the past, being a policy. Other observations or comment about the policy?
I have a question.
Okay, it sounds like Jimmy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I know this is, the bottom line where really the rubber hits the road on this is, whether or not we as a commission can have jurisdiction over medical care that affects the residents of the state of Washington. And if we could go up to, I don't know if we can scroll up to the original, the red edit language. In this section where it says the specialist may communicate that opinion directly with the patient, I wonder if there is some room for clarification there, because that opens up the possibility of developing a new patient-doctor relationship with somebody that the patient had never seen before, with somebody who's outside of our jurisdiction. So unless I'm missing something, I'm a little uncomfortable with that, unless somebody can explain how that would still be applicable for. I think I understand the intent of this, so that you can get an additional opinion. I feel like the accountability to the patient's care really should be within somebody who has a license in the state, and not somebody who's outside the state.
I think just to address that. So number one, the section in red is really derived from specific instances that we were asked to address from the governor's office. Who there were patients who were complaining, and the cancer center is a very specific instance. Many cancer centers and specialty centers around the country have looked at Washington's laws and policies and determined that no matter what, a license is required, because we are not explicit about the ability to get a second opinion or do a records review or anything like that, which is fairly standard with cancer centers when when someone wants to consult a specialist. Our attempt here is to say, okay, reviewing the records, getting the second opinion, while that is partially the practice of medicine, we're going to draw the line for a license at the treatment piece, so they can either, one, coordinate with a local practitioner to coordinate that care with who I would assume would be a PCP of some kind, or two, the patient travels to the specialty center and gets care under a licensed physician in that state, and therefore there's the responsibility. Does that still present a concern, or is that not clear in the paragraph?
Well, Micah, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, I think you're actually making a case for what I'm saying is my concern, which is a specialist who's outside the state communicating directly with the patient, to me, is practicing medicine in the state of Washington.
The definition of practice of medicine is diagnose and treat, not or treat. So I think that's why we were drawing this line. I think we also need to recognize the space that we're in with respect to the pandemic, where people were having difficulty traveling, and we have been asked to somehow address that issue. So it's up to the commission if they want to say absolutely no go. You may not talk to a patient if you're not licensed in this state. I think from a policies perspective, that might become a little untenable at the next legislative session, because there is some expectation of some more flexibility, and so we would need to deal with that when the time came.
I think the word opinion can carry both potentially a diagnosis and treatment. If they're opining on how to take care of the patient, there's really nothing in that sentence that says it's only a diagnosis and not treatment. So I'm assuming that a specialist who's outside the state makes a second opinion and then communicates directly with the patient. The patient will obviously say, well, then what should I do? I mean, there's nothing here that says that the specialist has to, can't provide treatment to the patient.
Jimmy, what is the patient safety issue that you're concerned about?
I think, it's maybe by principle. I'm just trying to understand that, is this a sentence that could potentially allow a doctor-patient relationship to occur with somebody who is outside the state? And does that then create a practice of medicine in the state of Washington by an individual who is outside of our jurisdiction? So it may only be theoretical, but I just want some clarity in that one sentence.
This came up several times. This came up several times when COVID hit, and the governor's office was aghast that we would not allow a patient whose only other option was to get an opinion from an out-of-state provider because of some rarity in their cancer, and said no, they can't do that. It's it's the unlicensed practice of medicine. So I think, as we move through this virtual world, I think that patients are going to try to, I just think that you have to have some wiggle room for these patients that are, they've only got one person they can see. This person lives in Texas. COVID said they couldn't travel, or they were too weak to travel there. And the person didn't want to get a license in the state. So I don't know how you address that, but it is a real thing. And I've dealt with it several times with the governor's office. So I just want you to be aware of that.
I'm also
And to-
Yeah, no, I can imagine that being an issue. We've allowed virtual care for years through radiology, but they still need a license in the state of Washington. So, you know, I guess, you know, I understand the situation behind how this came about. I'm just asking for more specificity in that sentence, because it seems like, you know, it's potentially a slippery slope.
My understanding of this is that the person has a clinician in state who is ultimately responsible for their care. And the second opinion is kind of using the Washington position as a conduit. I mean, that they also have a practitioner in the state, right? And the second opinion is helpful to that clinician.
Right. No, I understand the intent. I'm just saying the way it's written doesn't really specify it, such that if this specialist, let's say, if somebody who's communicating harmful opinion to the patient takes that opinion, and there's really no way that we can actually intervene.
Could I say something? Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I think it's a reality that, you know, when patient has some rare medical problem like cancer, and quite often they look some places that have specialties that really fit their needs, or you know, they heard some friends or family that someone else in a different state is very good treating particular cancer or serious illness. I think we shouldn't use that to restrict patients' ability to be able to do that. And I think it's going to happen. My question is, if a patient had a consultation with someone else through, you know, the internet telehealth, had made the consulting physician made a recommendation, does that actually establish the patient and provider relationship in the state of a residing physician? It's not based on where the patient said, because patient cannot travel there, but the treating physician resides in a different state. Then whatever's governing this relationship should be applied or applicable to the other state, not our state. That's why I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question as well. I mean, I wouldn't have any problems with a specialist communicating the opinion to the patient's in-state provider to work together. But I'm just saying that, you know, just the way it's written, there is a possibility that care is provided for a Washington state resident who, you know, that we can't oversee.
So I am sort of struggling still, Jimmy, to see the potential harm here, the potential safety, patient safety issue. If there is someone giving a bad opinion, that can be communicated to the state in which the person is practicing, and that's perhaps subjugating our responsibility. But without a treatment option, it seems difficult to say that this is going to be harmful. If they're prescribing a medication, they go pick this medication up and have some reaction that shouldn't have happened because it was not the right thing to do. That's treatment. If it's saying, yeah, I don't think you really ought to get that lump looked at, that's something which I think, you know, that could potentially do harm. But they have an opportunity to do, the patient themselves have an opportunity to do something different.
I understand what you're saying, Alden. I guess I don't think it's up to us to put that responsibility on the shoulders of the patient. I think if they talk to a doctor, they don't understand these rules. They'll take the doctor's opinion as, you know, as real medical advice, whether it comes from somebody out of state or in state. So if a doctor that they talk to out of state says, yeah, I don't think that's something you have to worry about, you know, and then ends up that the patient, you know, had a cancer diagnosis that was not treated or something like that, then I think that's something that we would normally investigate, but we can't because this person is out of state. So I'm just saying that we need to make sure that there is a way that we can oversee the care that's provided to a patient. In this sentence, there's nothing that says that differentiates between opinion and treatment. So an opinion could contain a statement about treatment.
Can I ask a question or comment? Jimmy, what if we put a comma between those two sentences? So it says that they communicate the opinion directly with the patient, comma, the patient may then choose to travel to see the practitioner or coordinate with their Washington person. I mean, it would link maybe, or because I feel like we're trying to clarify they can get an opinion, they just can't get a prescription or have any active treatment plan. And I would also just say that patients can get a lot of information off Dr. Google. So getting a bad opinion from Dr. Google or getting a bad opinion from somebody out of state, I mean, ultimately the patient does have some responsibility for deciding what they're going to do. The only thing we can do is say that out of state person can't prescribe, you know, that type of thing, right?
Right, but this is not a statement that regulates what patients can do. It's a statement that, you know, supposedly regulates what the physicians are supposed to do. So I think that, I mean, it's a good point, but I'm not sure if that is the same kind of comparison.
Well, but Jimmy, I would also argue, you said that somebody didn't need to do something. That actually is a treatment.
Right. Exactly.
Well, but that would fall outside of what this thing is given permission to do.
So to address Dr. Chung's comment, perhaps the edit could be for the sentence, in this case, the specialist in the distant state does not need a license to practice medicine in Washington to review the records and provide an opinion, comma, but not treatment, comma, but not treatment, comma, regarding the patient's care. Would that address your concern, Dr. Chung?
I think that's subtle, but I think it does. I think that would help.
Well,
Mike has been frantically waving his hand. Mike, do you have some
I do.
for us?
I do. I want to go back to what the legislature did, which I think covers almost everything that you're saying. Amelia, can you scroll up to show the previous paragraph? The legislature allows a physician-to-physician consultation. So the only difference between that first paragraph and the second paragraph is the sentence Dr. Chung is talking about, and that's allowing the outside physician to have direct communication with the patient. That's the only difference between the first and the second paragraphs. So if you have an issue with the out-of-state physician directly contacting the patient and thereby potentially creating a physician-patient relationship, if you take that out, then you're right back in the statute. So if that's the issue, if you don't want that to happen, you can eliminate this paragraph, and the statutory exemption in that first paragraph seems to cover this.
well,
So
Mike,
I
still
still see that as causing problems. I mean, Vancouver uses Portland a lot, and I'm not sure that making it difficult is a good idea.
well, that come back. My question, maybe, Ms. Farrell, that what really decide patient and physician's relationship is where the patient resides or where's the physician resides.
It's where the patient resides, and that's in our statute, in the compact statute. And that's the general view of all the state medical boards, where the patient resides.
Okay, thanks.
So are we going to eliminate the red paragraph, or are we going to revise the red paragraph? What's the consensus?
I would recommend that we vote on it as it is and let the vote determine whether or not it carries.
What about adding something like if there's a prescription or any treatment involved by the distance physician, it has to be coordinated through your local physician, something like that, or maybe already in there. So that would be a team.
Treatment is already prohibited. Treatment is prohibited, Yanling. They can't write a prescription unless they have a Washington license.
Well, then if you coordinate with your local physician that have been primary care for say cancer, then you get a prescription through your local physician rather than from the distant physician. That still give the patient the option to get a consultation and also get an opinion of what need to be done, and then work out with your own, local care team.
That already exists in the way it's written, though. The only thing that doesn't exist is what Jimmy is concerned about, and it's a valid concern, and that is that an opinion, does an opinion constitute treatment? Or can an opinion end up with a bad outcome? And I think that's a valid concern. And that would not give us the ability, if we don't do something, we can't control that individual. But that individual is practicing in another state, and I think the potential benefit of the way this is worded outweighs the potential risks. But that's just my personal opinion, and Jimmy has a very valid point in saying that it's not the right thing. So my thing is, as a commission, we don't have to have 100% agreement on what we're going to do with this. We can have a vote and make a decision one way or the other, or we can send it back to be revised again.
Let me ask Jimmy, with this additional changes in the red paragraph, does that provide a compromise or does that help?
Yeah, so like I was saying originally, I'm not saying I'm against the idea that a specialist from out of state communicate directly with the patient, but I wanted to get clarification as to how we're going to make sure that that doesn't end up being construed as a patient-doctor relationship, particularly from the point of view of the patient who doesn't know the nuances of all the different words that we use here. And so clearly, I think if we were to delineate what an opinion is versus a treatment, I think that definitely does help. If a specialist knows to say, I'm just going to tell you what I think this pathology slide shows, and share that with the patient. And if the patient says, well, what should I do? If the specialist knows to say, well, I can't really give you that information, but you can talk to your, other doctors there. I mean, that's a fine situation. But, if the specialist starts to give opinion in terms of like how to treat the problem, to me, that, really is a potentially problematic issue. So I think the way it's with that additional language, I think that might be helpful to clear that up.
Isn't that informed consent in one of the paragraphs about informed consent with patient should clarify or inform patient what exactly the state law allow and doesn't allow, and then they would make a joint decision what exactly should be done and when involved with actual treatment recommendations. Jimmy, I know some individuals who have a very rare disease. They couldn't get anyone could even figure out here, at least from their network of physician. They have to go out to other state to look for, get a consultation. I don't know whether treatment involved, but during the COVID, extremely difficult for those type of patients. I understand the concerns, but definitely I see that there's some sticky point. But I think that, maybe we could have beefed up the informed consent part so that both sides could come up an informed decision of what is the best and legal and best for the patients.
Larry, you have a comment?
Yeah, I essentially disagree with Jimmy on one thing. I think, and it may be that we agree, but I'm just hearing it wrong. But I think we do have control over what's being done, and that we can work with the other state. And for example, with the Portland case, we can be complainants if we feel the care is not right. We can report that person to their state board. So we can work with another board and another state if we don't agree with the care. So I don't think we're powerless in this situation as long as they are licensed in this country. We have avenues to work with this. And I think it's really important that we not interfere with the patient's ability to get care at the absolute best location for them. And as it's been pointed out, that may not be in the state of Washington, especially for rare diseases.
Claire, I think we agree, except that working with other states would occur after the fact, so after harm's been done. So my concern here is how do we prevent that? And of course, for what you said about getting care, as the second sentence says, the patient may then choose to travel to see the distant practitioner for treatment. So certainly it's accessible to that the patient.
But Jimmy, everything we do is done after the fact. We don't do preventive interventions. We're a complaint-based organization.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that one.
Okay, sounds like we have had a good talk, everyone. I think I'll call a vote in 3 different ways: yay, nay, and abstain, based on the conversation we had today. So all in favor of approving this policy, signify by raising your hand.
John, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but are we voting on this with the addition but not treatment, or the way it was originally?
I think as revised as a.
Okay.
So all in favor with the policy as revised, signify by raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same, raise your hand. I can't see everybody, so if you've raised your hand, let me know. And lastly, anyone abstaining from voting. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Good lively discussion, everyone. The next item on the agenda is discrimination in healthcare. This had a lively discussion yesterday at yesterday's policy committee meeting. There were a number of comments with some sections with Dr. Roberts and Mr. Rogers agreeing to collaborate on providing some new language. But the ask is for all commissioners to have a good solid look at this document and provide comments to either Mahi or Mike or both with regard to what your changes may be or your any comments you may have. Anyone else want to comment on what was stated at the policy committee yesterday? Wow, if Alden's not saying anything, then no one's going to say anything. So, okay. The last item we talked about was midwives, legend drugs, and device consultation draft. Again, this is another request. This had a fairly lengthy discussion as well, but the request is that all commissioners take a look at this and provide comments after today's meeting, or you can comment today if you like, but if you have written comments you'd like to submit, I think submit them to Mr. Farrell.
Mr. Malden, sorry, this
Yes.
is Diana Curry. I have one quick comment, and I'm afraid I lost power at my house, so I'm on audio only. But I just want to know if we should maybe add in IV transexamic acid, TXA. I wasn't sure if it was covered in the paragraph I read that's a commonly used medication for hemorrhage. So it sort of said medication for hemorrhage, but it also had separated out some IV things. So I wanted to make sure that was okay for midwives to use.
We can make a suggestion, but this is actually only asking for our opinion, and I think that's a good suggestion, Diane.
Okay, thanks.
Dr. Curry, can you email me what you just said?
Sure. Who is that who just spoke?
This is Mike Farrell. If you could email it to me.
Sure, Mike. Thanks.
Thanks.
Again, everyone, take a look and send your comments, edits, I guess, to Mike after you've had a chance to give a good thorough review.
Yeah,
Well,
Diana, we had representatives of the midwife at policy yesterday, so I think as long as we get that information to them, it will probably work its way into the document.
Okay, thanks.
Any further comments? Okay, with that concludes the review of the policy committee action yesterday. The next item are member reports. Does anyone have a comment or a report on activities or anything that's informational for the good of the order? Mr. Anderson.
Oh, let's see here. Okay, looks like I'm unmuted. So this isn't exactly a report, but I'm not sure where else to bring this up. And let me know if this is not the right time. But I was very interested, John, in the article that that you had forwarded to us based on an NPR story about what was happening with the difficulties or the lack of action from many state medical boards regarding misinformation offered or coming from licensed medical providers. I thought it was a really interesting story, particularly in light of the action that we took, and it made me glad that and proud that we as a commission did take the action we did about that. And I wanted to know if John, if you had any thoughts or any additional things to add. One of on the NPR story, which you shared with us, I was a little disappointed in the FSMB's stance, which is like, well, the commissions don't really have time to do this. Well, I mean, we made time to do that to address this, and I think that's really a sign of great leadership. But I was just curious. I just wanted to see if you, John, or anyone else had any particular thoughts or new insights or new information about this important issue.
Yeah, I think that we proactively addressed the issue and put it in writing. So I think insofar as our state is concerned, I think we've done the right thing. Can't really comment on what other states are doing or not doing. A little surprising about FSMB, but they did have a generalized statement that they made. So I think they are supporting the fact that misinformation is wrong. Is that a double negative? What is that? Bottom line is misinformation is not a good thing, particularly in this day and age with what we're dealing with. But anyone else have a comment on the topic raised by Jim?
This is Micah. Just a quick comment before we move forward. Let's please refrain from discussing any cases because we do have many ongoing cases related to this issue. So even inferences to something that we've done would be something we should avoid right now due to active litigation.
Thank you for that caution, Micah.
I think one of the things I was hoping when I saw this article was that there was some comment back to NPR that spoke on the freedom of speech issue, at least to say, you know, that we can't interfere with freedom of speech in our activities. That someone would reply to them that there's a reason that we aren't out there battling it the same way we would something else.
I don't think that that's something that the commission should do, but as an individual, anyone is free to make a comment back to NPR. So, Scott, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment quickly on the freedom of speech issue. It's something that will come up. We're not regulating speech. We're not telling people they can't speak to the media. We're not telling doctors they can't have their opinions. We're regulating the practice of medicine, and to any extent that speech constitutes practice of medicine, that is within our purview. I really think that's a red herring.
Well said.
But may I make comments? I think back in 1940-some or 50-some, there's a Supreme Court or some federal court ruling about freedom of speech in the content of medical care. I think that the ruling was that if the speech poses harm to the public, then that's not beyond the freedom of speech. It's not freedom of speech anymore. So I think that there's a precedent and ruling on that. For spread information, misinformation, disinformation, even though it doesn't directly involve patient care, but when you wear a physician or any providers, health medical providers hat, people listen, people follow, and that does create a risk of harm to general public. So it's a public risk of harm. So based on that ruling, I can dig it out if anyone interested. It is not just simply a freedom of speech issue anymore.
I'm going to have to step in here now and say that any kind of legal advice or opinions needs to come from our AAG and not from commissioners. Everybody has their own personal opinions of those cases, but so I would like for you not to come up with legal opinions on cases that are talking about freedom of speech. It's a very prickly situation, and there are different situations where there are freedom of speech issues and not. And so we have Heather to provide us with a way to guide us through that. So please, I would prefer that you not come up with opinions on this on your own, and we will always defer to our AAG advisors.
Yeah, I appreciate the reminder. I appreciate the reminder. I was mainly trying to say what I read, and it's not my personal opinion. So yeah, please don't take it like this. And medical and legal advice. I'm no legal expert, period. So.
Thank you. Are there other topics for discussion? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to staff reports found on pages 57 through 66. Are there any late developing issues to bring up to the commission by any of the staff?
Mr. Malton, can you see me? This is Rick Lyon.
Can't see you, but I know you have an item, Rick.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Sorry I didn't get a chance yesterday, but I'd like to introduce our newest staff attorney, Kelly Elder. don't know if you can see her. She just started this week, and she replaced Rochelle, who left us back in June. Kelly, would you like to say hi?
Sure, thanks, Rick. My name is Kelly Elder. I do have experience as a staff attorney at the Department of Health, actually Rochelle's old office, so I am acquainted with much of your work already. I look forward to meeting each of you individually and getting to work. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else, Rick?
No, that's it for now. Thanks.
Their staff have updates that weren't contained in the written document? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the AAG report from Heather, if she has one.
Nothing to report today. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I think that concludes our agenda today. Unless anybody has a parting comment, we will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Amelia,
Yes.
this is Diana Curry. Is there any chance you can send me a link to the Panel B personal appearances on an alternative email that I can get on my telephone, because I have no power at my house for today? Looks like we're having
Sure. Is it your?
Do you have?
Why don't I reach out to you in a minute?
Yeah, just send me or like telephone me if you share my cell phone. Thank you so much.
Sure. Bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
I'm afraid I saw Dr. Lyle's hand up and I missed her. I think she's maybe gone. Anyway,
Yeah,
we're
looks like
adjourned.
it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.